After my sister locked me in the freezing basement for 14 hours, my mother said, "Stop overreacting. It was just a prank." But when the doctor checked me out and saw the security footage, she said something that left them freezing. He stood up, cleared his throat, and said he was proud of me, that watching me build a career through hard work was one of the great joys of his life, that I was the kind of man he'd hoped I'd become. Judith stared at her plate. Mallory excused herself to the bathroom. The moment was ruined, but Dad finished anyway. After dessert, Mallory cornered me in the kitchen while I was getting coffee, asked about the estate review I'd mentioned. How far along was I? Had I looked at credit reports yet? Dad specifically, why would I look at yours? I asked. She laughed way too hard. Said she'd just been joking. Said I was always so serious. Then she mentioned that she'd been thinking about refinancing. Asked if I could look at her mortgage documents sometime. Said I'd probably understand the numbers better than she could. I said, sure, maybe after the holidays. She nodded, but her eyes didn't match the smile. Friday morning, Mallory found me in the kitchen making coffee. She had that smile, the one she used to wear right before she'd get me in trouble when we were kids. Dad wandered in while I was pouring my second cup. Asked if I'd had a chance to look at that bank letter he'd mentioned. Some notice about a credit inquiry he didn't recognize. I told him I'd pull his credit report after breakfast. See what was going on. Mallory was standing by the refrigerator. I didn't notice her face change. Didn't notice the way her hand tightened on the door handle. 20 minutes later, she asked about the sump pump. Hey, it's making this weird noise, she said. Can you go check it out? Boyd threw out his back and Dad shouldn't be climbing those stairs. Reasonable request. The basement in my parents' place was old and unfinished. Stone walls, exposed pipes, that musty smell of old Ohio basements everywhere. I grabbed a flashlight and headed for the basement door, left my inhaler on the counter. Phone, too. Mallory had suggested keeping it charging anyway, and I was just going down for a minute. What could go wrong? The stairs creaked under my weight. The basement was freezing. November in Ohio means temperatures in the 30s at night. And that basement had no heat source, just cold concrete and whatever warmth leaked down from above. The temperature gauge near the old furnace read 37 degrees. I found the sump pump, looked fine, sounded fine, no weird noises. I turned to call up to Mallory and ask what exactly she'd heard. The door slammed. The lock clicked. I took the stairs 2 at a time and threw my shoulder against the wood. Wouldn't budge. Someone had installed a deadbolt on the outside. Heavy-duty brass hardware that definitely hadn't been there on my last visit. Mallory, I yelled. What is this? Nothing. Then music started upstairs. Loud. The kind of volume that drowns out inconvenient sounds. I pounded on the door until my fists were raw. Tried the windows, but they were the old fixed kind that don't open. Found a piece of pipe and tried to break the glass, but the angle was wrong and I couldn't get enough force. Checked every wall for another exit. Nothing. Just stone and cold in that one door with its brand new lock. My chest was already tightening. Panic plus cold air is basically asthma's favorite combo. Every breath was getting harder. I sat down on the stairs and tried to control my breathing, which is hilarious when you're trapped in a freezing basement and your sister just tried to kill you. By hour 2, the cold had seeped through my clothes completely. Jeans and a flannel shirt don't do much against mid-30s temperatures when you're sitting on concrete. The gauge showed 35 degrees and dropping as night settled in. I found a moth-eaten blanket on a shelf and wrapped it around myself. Dragged some flattened cardboard boxes to make a barrier between me and the floor. Found old newspapers in a box and stuffed them inside my shirt for insulation. The paper crinkled every time I moved. I also discovered that if I curled into a ball and tucked my hands into my armpits, the shaking slowed down. It helped barely. The difference between dying in 8 hours and dying in 16. I kept moving, paced the basement until my legs burned. Did jumping jacks until my breathing got too bad. Every time I felt drowsy, I forced myself to stand. Drowsy and hypothermia means your body is shutting down. By hour 4, I'd stopped yelling. My throat was shredded. The wheezing had gotten bad. I wrapped myself tighter in that blanket and wedged myself against the wall near the furnace, which provided zero warmth because it only heated the floors above. I tried everything else, too. Banged on the pipes, hoping someone would hear. Attempted to pick the lock with a piece of wire from an old picture frame. Tried to pry the door hinges loose with a screwdriver I found in a toolbox. Nothing worked. Around hour 6, I started coughing. The deep kind that feels like your lungs are trying to escape through your throat. My airways were closing up. No inhaler. No help coming. No way out. The hallucinations started around hour 9. My grandmother, who died when I was 12, sitting on an old chair telling me to rest. Harper's voice from somewhere I couldn't locate. Shadows moving in ways shadows don't move. I knew what was happening. Hypothermia messes with your brain. Makes you confused. Makes you see things. Makes you want to lie down and sleep. Even though sleep is death. I made peace with dying around hour 10. Not dramatically. Just quietly accepted that this was probably it. Nobody was coming. That thought kept circling. Why? Why now? What was so urgent that she couldn't just avoid me for another few years? The promotion wasn't that big a deal. The estate review was just paperwork, unless there was something in that paperwork she didn't want me to see. I thought about all those questions she'd asked. Credit reports, account access, audits, when would I be looking at Dad's financials? The pieces were there. I just couldn't put them together through the hypothermia fog. By hour 12, I'd started talking to myself, reciting state capitals, counting backwards from 1,000. Anything to keep my brain active, keep myself from slipping into that final sleep. I did the alphabet backwards. Named every player on the 2016 Cubs roster. Made myself solve multiplication problems in my head. The cold does something to your brain. Numbers that should be easy become impossible. 12 times 7 felt like solving quantum physics. But I kept at it because stopping meant dying. I thought about Harper. Wondered if she'd gotten that fake text and believed it. Wondered if she was sitting upstairs right now watching football, having no idea her husband was freezing to death 20 feet below her. The cover story was clever. I'll give Mallory that much. About 20 minutes after locking me in, she went upstairs and announced I'd gotten a work emergency call. Had to leave immediately. She'd watched me drive off in such a hurry, I didn't even say goodbye. She grabbed my phone from the kitchen counter, sent Harper a text saying, "Work emergency. Heading back early. Explain later. Love you." Then deleted the sent message and put the phone back near my coffee cup. Even texted my work partner with some vague excuse about a family issue. Harper was confused but not worried. She knew my job. End of year in accounting meant emergencies happened. She figured I'd call when I could. She even apologized to Mallory for my sudden departure. My father was annoyed. He'd planned this whole dinner for me. Made a special trip to get the good steaks. And I just left without a word. He asked Mallory if I'd seemed upset. She said I'd gotten a call and my face went pale. Must have been serious. Judith jumped in immediately. "That's Mason for you. Always putting work first. No respect for family." The day continued normally for everyone upstairs. Nobody checked the basement. Nobody wondered why my car was still in the driveway even though I'd supposedly driven away. Mallory kept everyone busy, kept the house loud, kept steering people away from that door. Caleb wandered into the kitchen around hour 3 looking for snacks. He noticed my phone on the counter, then noticed my inhaler next to it, then noticed my car still in the driveway. "Yo, did Mason walk to work or something?" He asked the room. Nobody answered, but something about it nagged at him. He told me later he kept thinking about it while watching football. Mason left for a work emergency without his phone or his inhaler. He doesn't go anywhere without that inhaler. By hour 8, I'd stopped shivering. My body had given up trying to warm itself. Severe hypothermia territory. The kind where people lie down in the snow and never get up. My thoughts were getting fuzzy. Disconnected. I'd drift off and jerk awake. Confused about where I was. The basement seemed to shift around me. The door crashed open around hour 14. Not opened. Crashed. My father had kicked it in when the deadbolt wouldn't turn from his key. He is 62 years old with a bad knee and high blood pressure. He kicked that door so hard the frame splintered. 3 kicks. Fourth one sent it flying open. I've never seen him move that fast. He found me curled up against the wall, barely conscious. Blue-lipped and not shivering, which is worse than shivering. Started screaming for help. Carried me up the stairs himself despite the bad knee. Despite the fact that I'm 6 feet and 180. Mallory was standing in the kitchen when he emerged with me in his arms. Her face went white. Then she started babbling about how she thought I'd left. She had no idea. Why was I in the basement? This didn't make any sense. Caleb stepped between her and my father, blocking her path. His face looked different than I'd ever seen it. "You knew," he said. Just those 2 words. Then he turned and helped get me to the couch while Harper called 911. My father held me while we waited for the ambulance. Kept talking to me, telling me to stay awake, apologizing for not checking sooner. Judith stood in the corner, looking like she was calculating how this would affect the family Christmas card. Turns out Caleb had finally put the pieces together earlier that evening. Went to find Harper. Asked if she'd actually seen me leave. She hadn't. Asked if anyone had seen me drive away. Mallory had supposedly, but my car was still outside. Harper went white. She knew something Caleb didn't. That Mallory had been asking odd questions for weeks. Finance questions, audit questions. They started searching the house. Harper checked the garage. Caleb checked the backyard with a flashlight, which was stupid because why would I be hiding behind a shed? But that's Caleb. Thorough in the weirdest ways. He went room by room, checked closets, checked the attic. He was the one who finally said out loud what everyone was dancing around. Check the basement. My father checked the basement. The ambulance got there in 11 minutes. I remember sirens, oxygen masks, people shouting numbers I didn't understand. Harper's face, white with terror, holding my hand and telling me to stay with her. I woke up in Brampton Regional Medical Center, surrounded by machines and heat lamps, and a doctor whose expression suggested she'd already figured out some things about how I'd ended up there. Dr. Vivian Reeves was a woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen enough sketchy injuries to recognize when something wasn't adding up. She stood at the foot of my bed reading my chart with cold focus. Core temperature of 91 degrees. Severe hypothermia. Acute asthma attack triggered by cold air and panic. Oxygen levels that had dropped to dangerous territory. Frostbite on multiple fingers and toes. The works. She asked me what happened. I told her every detail. Dr. Reeves asked about my asthma when I'd last used my inhaler. What my triggers were. I explained that cold air was a big one. So was stress. So was being trapped in a freezing basement. She didn't smile, just nodded and said she was calling the police. Your sister knew about your asthma? She's known since I was diagnosed at 12. She used to hide my inhaler as a prank when we were teenagers. Dr. Reeves's expression suggested she had some strong opinions about what should happen to Mallory. She left to make her calls. Detective Garza showed up an hour later. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of cop who'd been lied to by so many people she could smell nonsense from across a room. Her partner was a younger guy named Wheeler who took notes and stayed quiet. I gave my statement, told them about the money I'd loaned Mallory, the dinner celebrating my promotion, the weird behavior, the questions about audits and finances, the suggestion to leave my phone and inhaler on the counter, the sump pump excuse, the deadbolt. Detective Garza's eyebrows went up when I mentioned the financial questions. She specifically asked about audits, about what you might find in records. Yeah, multiple times. Asked about credit reports, account access when I'd be reviewing my father's documents. And you're an accountant? Junior partner? Yes. She and Wheeler exchanged a look I couldn't read. She asked if we could review the security footage. My father had installed cameras 2 years back after some break-ins. They covered the first floor, including the kitchen and hallway near the basement door. My dad provided everything within the hour. He came to my hospital room afterward, looking like a man who just watched his world fall apart. She checked the lock 6 times, he said, his voice shaky. 6 times in 14 hours. She'd walk to the door, put her ear against it, test the handle, and walk away. I watched my daughter do that while my son was dying. Harper was in the room. When Jean described what he'd seen, she grabbed my hand so hard I thought she'd break my fingers. The footage showed other things, too. Mallory grabbing my phone and typing. Mallory telling everyone I'd left. Mallory positioning herself near the stereo, keeping the music loud, suggesting movies, getting the kids to play noisy games. Every time the house got quiet, she found a reason to make it loud again. And Judith helping, not knowingly, probably, but she'd validated everything Mallory said, agreed that I was always putting work first. Made it easier for everyone to believe I just ditched. The police arrested Mallory that evening. She cried. Said it was a misunderstanding, a prank that went wrong. She'd meant to let me out after an hour, but got distracted. The footage showed her checking the lock at hour 2, hour 5, hour 8, hour 11, hour 13. You don't lose track of time and check 6 times. But here's where it got interesting. Detective Garza called me 2 days later. Her voice was different. We found some stuff at your sister's house during the search, she said. Boyd agreed to let us search the whole place. I need to ask you some questions about your father's finances. They'd found documents in Mallory's home office. A credit application for a business loan with Jean's social security number. Forged signature. The business didn't exist, but the loan had been approved 8 months earlier. $42,000. They'd found records from Mallory's time sharing the church fundraiser. Donation logs that didn't match what the church had deposited. Small skims over several years totaling over $18,000. They'd found credit cards in Boyd's name that Boyd didn't know existed. Hidden statements showing purchases and cash advances. $63,000 in balances. They got a warrant for her phone after the footage came in. The forensic poll showed searches like basement temperature overnight November and how cold is dangerous, hypothermia and asthma attack, cold air how long. Dated across a 2-week span ending 3 days before Thanksgiving. Not smoking gun obvious. But when you stack it next to the deadbolt receipt and the timing of when she learned I'd be pulling Dad's credit report, the picture got clear fast.